Kyla Hart zipped up her coat as she stood beside her car, parked just off a service road near Mono Hot Springs, deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. She slung her pack over one shoulder and gave the horizon a long look. The air was sharp, the kind that stung your lungs but made you feel clean inside. Pine trees towered around her, dark green giants standing watch over snow-dusted earth. This was exactly what she needed. 3 days alone, no work, no phone calls, no people, just the trail and the cold and the sound of her boots crunching in the snow. She had planned it all out. A solo loop along the Mono Creek Trail, branching off to camp near some of the lesser-known alpine lakes, then looping back down toward Edison Lake before heading out again. It was ambitious, sure, but she had hiked and camped these areas before. Kyla was no stranger to the wilderness, but the wilderness didn't give a damn who you were. By the end of the first day, clouds had rolled in like a gray wall, and snow had started falling harder than she expected. Her pace slowed, the snow deepened. Still, she made camp near Second Recess, a remote offshoot nestled beside a narrow creek, now half frozen and hidden beneath layers of snow. Her tent went up smoothly, and she boiled some water for a freeze-dried meal. The silence out here was beautiful. No cars, no voices, just the light wind, pine, and crackling nylon. That night, she slept well. The second day started with a broken sun and a dim trail. Kayla strapped on her snowshoes and pressed forward, keeping her compass and GPS close. But by mid-afternoon, a storm hit. Heavy, wet snow started falling so fast it swallowed the path behind her. Her visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. She tried to stay calm, retracing her last steps to find a rock outcrop she had passed, but nothing looked familiar. Her GPS blinked red, no signal. She opened up her backpack and grabbed her cell phone. Damn, no signal as well. She tried to keep her mind away from an increasingly terrible situation. It was only supposed to be a light snowfall. That was what the forecast had said. But hours later, when she set up her tent again under a thick pine canopy, she knew she was no longer on the planned loop. She was off course, not dangerously so, just turned around. It had happened before. She knew how to handle herself. She was quite experienced. The third day came with a brutal wind and aching cold. Her food supply was fine, her gear was solid, but the maps no longer matched what she saw around her. Ridge lines were off, no water crossings where there should have been. She hiked all morning, trying to regain her bearings, but each hilltop she climbed offered nothing but more endless trees and whiteness. The GPS still blinked red, no bars. That night, her fire barely caught. She huddled inside her sleeping bag, trying to ignore the cold slipping into her bones. She told herself someone would realize she hadn't checked in, that help would come, but the truth sat in her stomach like a stone. Nobody even knew her exact route. By day 5, she'd stopped looking for the trail and started looking for a way out, survival mode. She melted snow for water and ate smaller portions of food. She kept moving downhill. That was key. Down usually meant toward civilization. The temperature dropped hard on the 7th night. She woke up shivering. Her tent half collapsed under the weight of new snow. Her fingers barely worked. One of her gloves had gone stiff with ice. She packed everything slowly, numb, and methodical. And that was when she started to feel it. She couldn't explain it at first. Just a tightness in her chest. Not panic, not yet. More like awareness, like something wasn't right. Everything seemed eerily quieter than before. Her human instincts told her something was off. She kept catching herself turning around, sure she had heard movement behind her. Once, just before dusk, she thought she saw footprints. Big ones, deeper than hers, but they vanished quickly, filled in by the falling snow. She laughed it off, told herself it was a shadow, maybe a black bear. But it didn't feel like a bear. The next few days blurred together. She rationed everything, barely spoke to herself, fighting the negative thoughts of dying out in the middle of nowhere. She stopped using her watch. Time meant nothing anymore. She focused on staying warm, moving in daylight, and not letting the fear get a grip of her mind. But the feeling only got worse. Sometimes she swore she heard breathing near her tent at night. Her firewood vanished once. She was sure she had stacked it before dark. When she woke, the pile was gone. The snow around her tent was disturbed, but no clear tracks. She told herself it was animals, but animals didn't steal firewood like that. Strange business. On the 13th day, she found a half-rotted deer carcass in the snow, stripped clean. Not eaten, torn. Its spine had been snapped like a twig. There were no other signs, no predator prints, no blood trail, just the corpse and the smell of rot. She started sleeping with her knife clutched in her fist after that. By the second week, she had run out of protein bars. She had boiled pine bark for calories, chewed old jerky so dry it hurt her teeth. She hadn't seen the sun in 5 days, but she was still moving. She reached a high ridge by chance, and what she saw there gave her some sort of hope with extreme curiosity. A valley, thick forest, but at the far edge, a roof. Just barely visible through the trees. It looked like a cabin structure, just a little bigger than your typical size. Hope slammed into her chest so hard she dropped to her knees in the snow. She didn't know how far it was. Maybe a couple miles, maybe more, but it was something, a direction, a chance. She stood up and started toward it, pushing through branches, stumbling down slopes, moving fast now. The storm was coming back in, clouds folding heavy over the peaks, and the wind was getting stronger. The forest was darker here, deeper, more intimidating looking, and in her mind she could feel something watching her because the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The wind was brutal. Kyla pushed through waist-deep snow, legs filling with lactic acid with every step. She was breathing heavy. Trees closed in tighter as she moved downhill, drawn toward the cabin she had seen from the ridge. Hours had passed, maybe more. It was hard to tell time when the sky stayed the same color, that dull, smothering gray that made you forget what blue even looked like. She kept going. Snow stung her cheeks, branches clawed at her jacket, but that roof had been real. She knew what she'd seen. It was the first sign of anything human in over 2 weeks. The thought of shelter, a stove, maybe even a radio, pulled her like a magnet. Around her, the woods had gone quiet again. A crow should have called by now. A squirrel should have darted across the path, but nothing moved, not even the trees. The wind had died, and in its place came a feeling she couldn't shake. She slowly turned around, expecting something peering at her through the trees, but her eyes caught something strange to her right. A tree trunk, split near the base, deep claw marks running up the side, spaced far apart. Too wide to be a bear, too deep for a cougar, something bigger. She backed away, careful not to trip. A heavy crunch echoed from behind her. She quickly spun around. Nothing there. Something caught her attention. In the snow, about 30 feet away, half hidden by brush, was a footprint. Long, wide, almost human, but not quite. Toes were too long, the arch too sunken. Claws had dug deep into the snowpack. Kayla's stomach flipped. She had read about things like this. Stories online and YouTube, legends in mountain towns, backwoods hunters talking about Bigfoots and upright walking wolves called DOGMAN. Cursed creatures that stalked the edge of civilization. She had laughed it off. Everyone did. Now she wasn't laughing. She turned and moved faster, picking her way downhill, eyes darting through the trees. For the next hour, she didn't stop. Her lungs ached, legs trembling, but fear kept her upright. Every few minutes, she heard something just behind her. A crack, a thud, something brushing against bark. But every time she looked, there was nothing. She finally saw it, the cabin, slumped beneath the trees at the edge of a frozen meadow, its roof bowed under snow, windows dark, smoke pipe crooked but intact. She nearly cried. It was old, probably forgotten, but it was shelter. She stumbled across the clearing, kicking up powder, boots soaked and fingers numb. The door creaked as she pushed it open. It was surprisingly unlocked, half expecting to find someone inside, but it was empty. The room smelled of dry wood and dust, a cot against one wall, a cast iron stove in the corner. Some old canned goods on a shelf, rusted but sealed, no signs of recent use. She slammed the door shut and locked it with the metal latch. Then she collapsed. Her body gave out as soon as it felt warmth. The stove worked, barely. She used some leftover kindling and firewood that was stacked by the wall and struck a flame with the emergency kit she had guarded like gold. When the fire finally caught, she sank down beside it, shaking from cold and adrenaline. It wasn't until the fire had warmed her face and fingers that she finally let herself breathe. As night fell, she tried to eat. The can of beans was bland and mushy, but it was food. She pulled her sleeping bag close to the stove and wrapped herself inside, knife gripped tight in her hand. Every creak of the old wood made her flinch. Every howl of wind felt like breath on her neck. Just as her eyes began to shut from exhaustion, the sound of scratching came. At first, it was light, just light taps against the wall outside. Then, another. She sat up, eyes bloodshot, gripping her knife. More taps, followed by a slow, heavy drag of claws across the cabin siding. It circled once, twice, maybe 3 times. The amount of fear she felt in that moment was undescribable. The clawing went on for about 5 minutes, then they finally stopped. Just silence. She waited. Minutes passed, maybe more. A thud hit the side of the wall behind her, scaring the hell out of her. Then came the growling, low and rumbling. She stood, blade shaking in her hand, and backed away from the stove. Her breath clouded in the cold air. Outside the window, something moved, a large shape. Yellow eyes reflected through the glass. A dogman. It stood there, staring through the window, fogging the glass with its breath. It just stood there watching her. She could see its massive chest breathe in and out. Kyla stood there, frozen in fear. The thing raised one clawed hand and touched the window pane. And then, out of nowhere, a second figure stepped into view behind it. This one was bigger. Its fur darker, matted with snow and filth. The first one turned its head, surprised. The second one lunged. They collided with a roar that shook the trees. Kyla dropped to the floor. The cabin vibrated as the fight exploded outside. She heard bodies slam into the walls, snarls so deep and loud they rattled her eardrums. The dogmen were fighting, and she had no idea why, no clue where the second one came from, but it was happening. She didn't wait. Grabbing her pack, she burst through the back door of the cabin and ran. She didn't care where she was going, just the hell away from that flimsy cabin. She knew it wouldn't keep those monsters from getting in. Branches tore at her arms, snow filled her boots, but she ran. She ran as fast as she could. Behind her, the fight kept going. She could still hear the roars and crashes. She didn't stop, not until the sounds faded behind her and only her own gasping breath filled the night. Kayla's legs barely worked. Each step sank deep into the snow. Her lungs burned with every breath and her vision blurred from cold and exhaustion. But she kept going, crashing through brush and low branches, tripping, stumbling, crawling if she had to. The sounds of the dogmen fighting still echoed in her skull. The snarls, the crunch of bone, the guttural roars that didn't sound like anything that should exist. She crested a ridge and collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping. Her ears rang. She forced herself to stay down and let the cold numb the panic. She needed a direction, any direction. She scanned a dark snow-covered forest and spotted a narrow ravine cutting downhill. It could lead to water. Water meant animals. Animals meant people might not be far. She moved, slower now, eyes scanning every shadow. Her knife was gone, dropped somewhere in the sprint. She grabbed a sharp rock and held it like it meant something. The next few hours were a blur. Her thoughts came in pieces. Her legs moved out of habit. She remembered slipping once, rolling halfway down a slope, her coat tearing on a branch. She remembered crawling across frozen roots, fingers bleeding. Her lips cracked, her feet were soaked through. She had no idea how long she walked. Eventually, the trees began to thin. Light filtered through the canopy, soft and pale. Morning. She stumbled into a clearing and dropped to her knees. A road, gravel, packed hard and clean of snow from plows, tire tracks still visible. She cried, not loud, just a quiet, broken sound. Relief washed over her like heat, and for the first time in weeks, she let it all out. The hunger, the pain, the fear, all of it. She stood again, wobbling, and followed the road. Half a mile in, she saw it. A small house, wood siding, smoke drifting from the chimney, a red pickup parked out front. It looked like heaven. She limped toward it, waving her arms, tears freezing on her cheeks. Her voice cracked when she tried to call out, barely more than a whisper. The front door opened. A man stepped out, mid-50s, maybe, wearing flannel and boots. He held a mug of coffee and stared at her for a second, stunned. Then he rushed forward. "Jesus Christ," he said, catching her before she fell. Hey, you okay?" She nodded, barely. He wrapped his coat around her and helped her inside, setting her down by the fire. "You hurt." She tried to speak. Nothing came out, just a hoarse rasp. He gave her water. She drank in small, greedy sips. "What's your name?" She swallowed hard. Kyla, I'm Rick. You're safe now. I'm gonna call someone. Get help here fast." She nodded again, eyes closing, letting the warmth sink in. Her body trembled violently. It would take hours for her core temp to stabilize, but for the first time in 3 weeks, she wasn't alone. Rick called the sheriff, said he had a hiker that looked like she had been out there for days, maybe longer. When the deputies showed up, they were gentle, careful. They wrapped her in blankets, asked questions, soft voices. She answered what she could, told them about getting turned around in the snowstorm, how she survived. She left out the dogman she encountered in the woods. Not because she didn't remember, but because she knew they wouldn't believe her. She wasn't even sure she believed it. One of the deputies said they had been looking for her for over a week. Her car was found, and a search party had gone out, but the storm had slowed everything. They never thought she had made it that far off course. "You're lucky to be alive," one of them said. She just nodded. Later, at the hospital in Fresno, they ran tests. She was down almost 20 pounds. Frostbite on her fingers and toes, mild dehydration, but no broken bones, no infections. The nurses called her a miracle. Reporters wanted interviews. Her story was on the news. Lost hiker, found alive after 21 days in the Sierra wilderness. They called it a survival tale, a triumph of will. People sent messages, praise, offers to write books or do podcasts. She said no to all of it because they didn't know what really happened. How some nights she felt that breath behind her tent. How something stalked her without leaving tracks. How it watched her for days, maybe weeks. How it stood outside that cabin, peering in at her growling. How that one giant dogman saved her life. If that second one didn't intervene and fight the smaller one, she was dead. Weeks passed, her body healed, but her mind stayed sharp, awake, alert. She flinched at shadows, slept with lights on, refused to go near woods. She never went back. One night, As she sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through news headlines, she saw a story from the same region. A hunter had gone missing near Mono Creek, his camp torn apart, rifle snapped in half, no sign of a body. The search was still ongoing. She closed the laptop without reading more. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.